America's waterways move soybeans, corn, grain products, and more from family farms to feed the world. U.S. agriculture's positive trade balance relies on efficient waterways to transport these products at the lowest cost. From the upper Mississippi River to the Gulf, our waterways provide efficient, safe, environmentally sound ways to move freight. Modern waterways move America forward toward a stronger U.S. economy. Brought to you by Waterways Council and its stakeholders.
Well, thanks for joining us here for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Senior Editor Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And Phil, starting off today talking about some action that has been building up for a while now, but some action that kind of came to fruition in the last couple days regarding action on biotech in the Senate. Now, earlier this year, I believe it was in kind of late July, the House passed what was called the Pompeo Bill, or the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act, preempting state GMO labeling laws, establishing a national standard of sorts, and had been waiting for some kind of a Senate action. Now, we have seen a Republican, John Hoeven of North Dakota, had said he was kind of willing to kind of take up that mantle, but needed a Democrat for that bill to have bipartisan sponsorship. And it sounds like we're getting closer to that path.
Right. The big news this week is that the top Democrat on the Senate Agriculture Committee, Debbie Stabenow, announced at the beginning of a really landmark hearing on biotech issues on Wednesday that she wanted to see a bill pass, that they needed to pass a bill, in fact, by the end of the year. That's big because Senator Stabenow is really the key to enacting this legislation to block state laws that would require labeling of GMO products. Sources tell us, Spencer, that she is actually leading a group of maybe 5 to 10 Democrats who are in serious discussions about a compromise bill. It would be different than what passed the House in some key ways. We know that one of the major issues being discussed is the possibility of requiring disclosure of GMO ingredients in barcodes that are on food labels, but not in the language on the labels themselves. We're also told that there's a real sense of urgency now in the Senate and among Senate Democrats because food companies are worried about the law that takes effect next summer in Vermont. They're starting to have to think about that and do things, and so senators therefore are getting serious about passing a bill.
And just kind of some of the inside baseball that we heard up on Capitol Hill was that Senator Hoeven wasn't really struggling to find Democratic votes and Democratic support. It was finding that one Democrat that was really going to be willing to put their name on this legislation. Is that kind of still the sentiment? But now we're seeing some real Democratic support emerge?
Yeah, they absolutely have to have a Democrat on the bill, probably for it to pass. But, in the Senate, it takes 60 votes really to do anything. That means when you have 54 Republican votes, possibly lose, one or two or three of those, you need several Democrats. And so they do need, practically speaking, they do need Democrat support to move the bill in the Senate. But the other thing is, Senator Stabenow has so much credibility as the top Democrat on Senate Agriculture Committee. Really an author of co-author of the 2014 Farm Bill. She is the senator that other Democrats look to. And if she signs off on a bill, she's going to bring some other, particularly farm state Democrats, along with her.
And it sounds like there's going to be some differences between that legislation, whatever it ends up being, and what has already passed the House, that being the Pompeo bill. So I imagine there'll be some conferencing, a little bit of back and forth to get a bill eventually to President Obama's desk. And speaking of the House of Representatives and that flawless segue that you just witnessed there, we've seen some action in the past couple of weeks, action in action, however you want to term it. Currently, they are in search for a speaker job. I don't think they have it listed on Craigslist, but it was about to that point there for a while. Kevin McCarthy, who was kind of assumed to be the heir apparent, stepped in and said he didn't want the job, didn't think he could unite the caucus in the way that others could. And right now, it's looking like there's some assurance, some momentum that Paul Ryan of Wisconsin, formerly a vice presidential nominee with the Mitt Romney ticket, might have that job in the bag, might have the support of, not unanimous Republican support, but a lot of Republican support. So Phil, what was it that really kind of tipped the scales in his direction these last couple of days? Because he wasn't even thinking of running up until a few days ago.
Well, publicly he wasn't thinking about running. He has certainly set himself up now to have much more power than he would have if he had actually campaigned for the job. He didn't campaign for it. He basically got his fellow Republicans to draft him. He is probably the one person who could really unite the Republican conference in the House, and that's no easy task. And so there was, I don't know if desperation is too strong a word among his colleagues for him to run. Well, on Tuesday night, he finally announced in a private meeting with Republicans that he was willing to run, but he put some conditions on it, and key to that is he said he wanted the Republican caucus united around him. The big issue there is about 40 very conservative members of the House, part of what's called the House Freedom Caucus. They had been holding out for some major changes in House rules so that they would have more influence over the leadership. Paul Ryan met with them Wednesday afternoon. They talked about a number of the rules, and then the House Freedom Caucus got together on Wednesday night. They didn't actually formally endorse him because under their rules, 80% of the caucus has to be in support of an endorsement before they can actually give it. But there were substantially more than half, a supermajority, as it was announced. And Paul Ryan subsequently put out a statement saying he was going to continue to run. So he essentially has the position locked up now. One significant thing that came out of that, however, in terms of for agriculture, is that in that meeting with the House Freedom Caucus, Ryan committed to not bringing up a broad-based immigration bill unless it has the support of a majority of Republicans. And this is going to make it much more difficult, not just next year, because we didn't expect anything to happen in a presidential year, but in the next Congress, much more difficult for a broad immigration bill to move that might address a guest worker program and some of the other priorities of producers and food processors.
And current Speaker Boehner has scheduled elections for, I believe, early to mid next week. They're gonna finally address this issue. I believe the House's meeting, or the House Republicans meeting on I believe the 27th, and the General House is going to elect a new Speaker on the 28th. At a certain point, whether it's John Boehner, Paul Ryan, or Philip Brasher, somebody's got to be the Speaker of the House. So somebody's going to get elected out of this deal, and we'll be sure to keep you up to date on who that is. Also want to just briefly touch on some other action in the House of Representatives. Thursday, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee marked up a 6-year transportation highway funding bill. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because the current short-term extension expires middle of next week. So there's going to need to be something happen to, I imagine they're not going to be able to pass a House bill as well as conference with the Senate and get something to President Obama's desk by the middle of next week. Just the way Washington works, I don't think that's going to happen. But I imagine there might be some momentum enough to where they can get a highway funding bill introduced soon, as well as get a short-term extension cleared and get an extension cleared in the Senate as well. Give them some time to conference those two bills, because the bill passed by a voice vote in the committee, so broad bipartisan support for that legislation in the committee level, and I imagine probably similar bipartisan support, a strong vote could be expected on the House floor once it gets there. Still needs a way to pay for itself, things of that nature. So the bill still has a little bit of work to do, but there is a long-term transportation bill in the works in both chambers. The Senate passed something late July, early August, something of that nature. So potential for Congress to put forward a long-term transportation bill out of conference here before the end of 2015. It's going to about do it for what we had to tell you for this week, Agriculturally Speaking in Washington, D.C. We'll be sure to keep you up to date on all of our other issues and all of the other news that we carry at agripulse.com. For Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.